Okay, since we have successfully created a Notes application with Vue.js, now we need to create REST API, which will support login, registration, and then getting, creating, updating, and deleting notes for a specific user. And if we aren't authenticated, we should not be able to make requests. Okay, so first I'm going to make the API and test it only by Postman. Okay, to make sure my API is fully working, and then integrate this into Vue.js. Because when you integrate API with browser, there is additional problems such as CORS. Okay, so let's start with Yii2, and I'm going to close all my Vue.js files, and let's go to the, actually, let's have a look in the browser first. Okay, so when we navigate between pages, we see that the URL looks like index.php !r equals site encoded version of / and contact. We need to change this. I want to change this, and I want to enable pretty URLs. Otherwise, we would have to use the same pattern when we make requests using API, using Postman. Okay, so let's go to the web.php, scroll down and find here URL manager. And we want to uncomment this to enable pretty URLs and set show script name into false, and then let's reload the page. And now when we navigate between pages, we see pretty URLs, which is cool. Okay, the next thing is that we need to create and configure database. Okay, so I generally work with PHP Storm's integrated database plugin, but I understand that most of you may not have PHP Storm and are using VS Code or some other IDE. That's why I'm gonna use just normal PHP myadmin. Okay, so localhost /php myadmin. Okay, here is my admin, and let's create new database. I'm gonna call it Vue.js Yii2 notes. Okay, and I'm going to set encoding to be UTF-8 MB4 Unicode CI. This is the encoding which I generally choose. Okay, the database was created. Now we need to go to the db.php and configure the database. Okay, this is the database name, Vue.js Yii2 notes. Right, so root password empty, that's everything okay. And after this, we need to start generating migrations. Okay, so I have two terminals here, both of them are occupied, so I'm going to open a new one, php e migrate /create. Okay, and create users table. Actually, if you name your migration file in this pattern, create something table, then this will generate create table code for you. So I do have a separate video about migrations, which is about like 25 minutes long. I will put this in the link of this video in the description of this video, or you can find the link in the top right corner, and definitely check out working with migrations. Okay, create users table -- fields. And we're going to use username to be string 255, and we can specify also not null, it must be required. Okay, so we need password hash to be string 512, let's say, and it must be also required. We need access token, and that access token will be bearer authentication token when we communicate from Vue.js to REST API. Okay, access token, that's also string, let's say 1024. And what else do we need? Okay, so I think that's enough. Okay, username, password, hash, access token, that's enough. Let's make it simple. Okay, click yes, the migration was generated right here. Let's have a look. So we have here create table users, ID is primary key, username string not null, password string not null, access token just string. Access token should also be not null, to be honest. Okay, so without it, it doesn't make any sense. And it also generated, this script also generated safe down. Okay, let's create second migration for nodes. php e migrate migrate / create notes table -- fields equals title to be string, lowercase string 255, body, let's say it's to be text. Then we have created it when the note was created. Let's save this information also. Integer 11, updated it when the note was updated. We don't want space right here. Updated it to be integer also 11, and created by who belongs the note to. This field is absolutely necessary because we need to get the notes based on this field. Okay, created by to be integer 11, and we can say that this created by field has foreign key on users table. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, new migration created successfully. Let's open this migration, and here we see. So it created that script for create table. I forgot to put here not null, so title and body should not, actually they can be null. Okay, so when we create new node, everything is empty. Okay, let's scroll down and see it created that create index code and add foreign key. It also created the code in save down, which is cool. Okay, so after this we need to start login implementation using user modal. Okay, so we have user modal in modals, and here it is. So it implements identity interface, and that's absolutely necessary, but it extends from eBase object. Okay, so it is not connected to the database by any means, and it just uses a local static private array to log in. Okay, so here is written username and password. So if we just try to log in with admin, click enter, here we are logged in, and this was checked against that username and password written in the static users array, which we need to change obviously. Okay, so let's start, and I'm going to clean up this code. Actually, first I'm going to extend this from active record. Okay, so active record, and the active record object is a mapped version of the table user. So here's the thing: by default, when you extend class from the active record, it assumes that there is a table user in the database, and it tries to map the current object, current class to that table. But we don't have user, instead we have users. Okay, so we have created that table. I'm gonna change the table name right now, but first we need to run migrations to apply our two new migrations. Okay, php migrate yes, and migration failed. Okay, nothing was applied. Okay, what's the problem? Function name must be string create users table. Probably I made a mistake. Let's go to the migrations, create users table. Here I made mistake. Okay, my bad. Okay, let's try to apply this migration, and we have one more error. Weird. Function name must be string on line 17. Right here. Oh, again the same thing. My bad. Let's try third time, and now one migration was applied, which is good but not so good. I think I have the same scenario about right here. Yeah. Okay, to be honest, the generation of the migrations can be even better if it understands that I have put there parentheses and just doesn't use that double parentheses. That would be additional feature if it would be there. But okay, so let's run this, and migrated up successfully. So both migrations were successfully applied. Let's have a look in the php my admin. and we see, let's go to the Vue.js, we see 3 tables: migration, nodes, and users. This migration table was created by the framework itself whenever we run migrations. Okay, this keeps track how many migrations are already applied to the system. Okay, but we have nodes and users tables, and now I'm going to modify the user modal. Okay, so let's go to the user modal, and we need to do the following. So I'm going to clean up code right here, and when you implement identity interface, you have to implement these methods: find identity by access token, then here we have get ID, get auth key, validate auth key, and that's it basically. And right now all of these methods are implemented based on the static array, which was right here. So now we need to change this and implement based on the database. Okay, so find identity, self find, and we can pass here find one, give here an ID, and that's it. Okay, find identity by access token, return self find where. Generally I always write and where. Okay, so if there will be additional where written before, this won't overwrite. Okay, just writing where will overwrite any additional wheres which were done before. Okay, right now we haven't done any wheres before, but it also doesn't hurt to anybody if I just write here and where. Okay, and where access token corresponds to token. Okay, and finally we need to call one to just find one user. And let me copy this code and put it right here, and we need to do the same thing for username. Okay, find by username, pass here username, and that's it. Get ID, we need to return ID. Get auth key, we don't have auth key, we don't need it, so I'm going to return null. Validate auth key immediately, I'm going to return false. And we have here validate password, and the field, our password field in the database is called password hash. Okay, so we need to write here password hash, and that should actually we shouldn't do like this. So this is the plain password, this is hash, so we need to compare this password against the hash. So for this, E has security component. Okay, so E up security, and it has validate password. Okay, so you give the plain password, you give the hash, this password hash, and it compares and returns true or false. Look at this. So semicolon here. The ID cannot understand that the user class has password hash. Okay, so we need to fix this. So I'm going to go at the very top and add here annotations. Okay, so this is the class user, and I'm going to add a couple of properties right here. Okay, property integer to be ID, and let's duplicate this property string to be username, property password hash to be also string, and property access token. Cool. So now it doesn't complain about the password hash, and also when I start typing, it autocompletes it. Okay, cool. So now we can actually try to log in using browser, and we will see like incorrect username and password. We should see it. Okay. Yeah, this is the first error. Table doesn't exist user. As I said before, this user searches for user table in the database because the class is called just user. Okay, so if you call your table name just user, you won't have these problems. But it's also like a good practice to have table names described right here, and I'm going to describe one table name, call it users, and that's it. Okay, so now let me reload the page, and here I have a login page. So let's type admin, hit the enter, and I get that username or password is incorrect. Okay, so we don't have any users in the database yet, so let's create one. Okay, so for this I'm going to create a console command, console controller and action to add one user. Okay, let's go to the commands, hello controller. So the console application works just like web application. It has its own configuration, it has its own application, and it has its own components and actions and controllers. Okay, so this is console controller, hello controller, which extends from the console controller right here, and it has one action index. Okay, so and if we open the terminal and just write php e hello / index, this will print hello world, which is printed right here. Okay, so we don't want hello controller. Instead, I'm gonna rename it and call it, let's call it app controller. Okay, so here we go. Good, and let's create one action to add user. Okay, action add user. Okay, so let's accept here username and password, and let's create the user. So user equals new user. Let's assign username equals username, user password hash equals to the hashed version of the password. Okay, so app security component has generate password hash. Okay, so we give password and generates the hash, and my bad, user access token to be some random string. Okay, app security generate a random string. Okay, 255. Okay, let's generate by default this generates 32 characters long random string. Just I'm gonna override this and generate much longer. Okay, actually I can take this app security and move in a separate variable, call it security, and here we go. Okay, and now we need to save the user. Okay, if user was saved, let's output console output saved, else let's output not saved, and let's also dump the errors if it wasn't saved. Okay, user errors. Cool, now let's run php e app / add - user. We give the username, let's call it Sura, and 1 2 3 4 is the password, and the output is saved. Let's open phpMyAdmin, and here we see user Sura. Now let's try to log in. Okay, so here we have Sura, 1 2 3 4, hit the enter, and boom, we have successfully logged in. So the authentication now works based on the database. Okay, now let's start working on the API, and let's create a user controller for the API and test our login, and then we need to create registration also. Okay, so for this I'm going to create a module. Okay, so let's create modules, and inside the module I'm going to create one API folder as a API module, and I'm going to create a module class which will have the namespace app modules API. Okay, so hit the OK. That must extend from eBase module. Okay, so, and we created this. We need to also create controllers folder, controllers, and we need to create, let me first create default controller. Okay, and this must have app modules API controllers namespace. Hit the OK, and let me first extend this from eWeb controller and create right here index action. Okay, and let me just print something. Okay, echo hello. Okay, so now let me show you one thing. If we don't add this API module in the config, it simply doesn't work. Okay, since we add it, then we can access it by /API or whatever key we give. Okay, so if I hit the enter right now, it shows not found. Let's go to the config, web, and we have here components. So I'm going to create modules down below the components, and the key will be API. So this will be whatever we write in the URL. Okay, API corresponds to some configuration object where the class of the module will be app modules API module. Okay, just like this. And now let's try to access this in the browser, refresh the page, and we see hello right here. By default, when we access module, just module name, just like this, it searches default controllers index action. Okay, and let me change something right here. So I'm gonna, instead of echo, I'm gonna return this render content and put here hello. So this will return the layout in the show also debug bar. Okay, so here's my hello, and if we expand the debug bar, we see the root is default controllers index action. Okay, so module works, controller works. Now let's actually make this as a REST controller. Let's rename this also into users or user controller, and to start using Postman. Okay, so I'm going to rename this into user controller, just like this. And we need to extend this not from eWeb controller anymore, but from eREST controller. Okay, and let's create action login. Actually, I'm going to do the following. So I'm going to copy the code from site controllers login action. Okay, here's the login. So I'm going to copy this code, modify, and explain it. Okay, so here it checks if the user is not guest, which means if the user is already authenticated, go home. So I'm going to just comment this code for now. So we have login form right here, and we are putting the post data inside the model. So I'm going to do like this. I'm going to give the second parameter as an empty string, which is the form name. Okay, so this is more common. Form names are more common for forms in the browser, not for REST API. Okay, so form name is empty. Then we try to log in. If the login was successfully done, we can immediately return the user information. Okay, so the login form has right there private user, and it also has down below get user. Okay, so let's explain this login form, by the way. So it has a couple of properties: username, password, remember me. It has rules. It has custom validation rule, validate password, which is described right here, and it has login and get user. Get user simply tries to find the user by username. Okay, and then it calls login. So right here, I'm gonna call modal get user. Okay, so if the user was successfully logged in, let's just immediately return the user. Okay, so if the user was not successfully logged in, however, we need to return different status code, eApp response status code to be 422. This is the validation error, and let's just return validation errors. Okay, errors to be modal errors. Okay, now let's start using API. Okay, so let me open Postman. Okay, and let's start building API. So the request endpoint will be localhost / API / user / login. Okay, so we need to make post requests on this URL. The headers should have, we're gonna basically use JSON. Okay, so I'm gonna send content type to be application / JSON, and inside the body we're gonna pass row body as a JSON string. Okay, so username to be Zura and password to be 1234. Okay, so let's send request and have a look in the response, and we get object not found, API user login, and this is not found. I think we need HTTP right here, and that's the problem. And my bad, we are sending requests on port 8080. Okay, so we were not logged in, but we get errors empty array, and the reason for this is that the post is actually empty. Okay, so if we just print post right here, the whole post array, look at this. So it is empty. That's because we're sending JSON data, but our Yii application doesn't know that we're sending JSON, and it doesn't parse the JSON. Okay, so we need to go to the web, config web, find the request object, and right here we need to add parsers array to be so for application /JSON content type, which is the content type we are sending in the headers. Let's use JSON parser class. Okay, so now let's make request, and we see post data, and it returned the currently logged in user's information. Okay, cool. Let's remove that var dump, and let's just make request again, and let's have a look in the pretty, and here it is. So we get every information about the user, what we have in the database: ID, username, password, hash, and access token. Okay, we need all of them except password hash. Okay, so we don't want to return password hash to the user and save this in the browser. This is not like a really secure way. Okay, so let's go to the actually I'm going to do like this. So this login form is using right here user modal. Okay, so we don't want to use that user modal, because whenever we use this, it returns all the properties. Instead, I'm gonna do basically I have two options. At least these are what just came to my mind. So from the user controller, when we call get user, this returns the whole user. Okay, so we can return only the fields what we are interested from this get user. Okay, so for example, we can call toArray and pass there only fields what we are interested, like ID, access token, and username. Okay, let me change the ordering: ID, username, and access token. And if I make request right now, it doesn't return password hash anymore. However, I'm going to show you the second way, which is more complex but more powerful also. Okay, so let's go to the modules API, and generally whenever I return some information from the API, I generally create resource for this. Okay, so I'm going to create resources folder, and I'm going to create right there user resource. Okay, the namespace will be app modules API resources. Hit OK, and this user resource must extend from a user modal. Okay, and the only thing what I'm going to change right here is override fields method and just return the fields what I want to be returned. Okay, so the following fields, and let's remove this toArray. So we have user resource already, and we need to use that user resource right now. Okay, so when get user is called, instead of calling user find by username, I'm going to call user resources find by username, just like this. And when I click login again, I don't get password hash anymore. Okay, so one more thing what we need to do when we're building REST API is that we need to configure our user component. Okay, config web PHP. Let's find user component right here, and this is the identity class it is actually using, and it has enable auto login set to true. So we need to set this to false. Okay, from request to request, the API must not know who the user is, and it cannot know. Enable auto login set to false, and this user class also has the identity class, the identity interface basically, not the identity interface, my bad, but the user component also has property called enable session, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so let me just search for this, and also will show you how you can search such kind of informations. Yii2 user component. Okay, here's eWeb user, and let's search for session. Okay, I remember this field right here, enable session, which is by default is set to true, but we don't want this. We don't want session to be enabled. And actually we can also find that file in our IDE. Just hit the double shift to search the file and search or not only file but method, namespace, and so on. Okay, just type e\web/user and you will find that user. Let's open this user component, and we have enable auto login false, enable session true. Okay, so we just need to set enable session into false. Enable session corresponds to false, just like this. And that is basically all what we wanted about to create a basement for REST API. So we have authentication, we have actually login. Now we can focus on registration. Okay, just one thing which we need to fix also. So we are using login form which comes from the models login form, and we changed user resource inside the login form, and that's not quite accurate, because now when we try to log in from the browser, this will also use that user resource. Okay, so from browser I need to use it as it was using before. From REST API I need to use it the user resource. Okay, so for this we need to create that login form inside the API. So I'm going to create models and put there the login form. I'm going to extend the login form which comes from the models login form. First, let me change the namespace of this, otherwise you can't understand. App models API models. And I'm going to extend from login form of app models, and I'm going to basically remove everything from here except that get user. Okay, so whenever get user is called, I'm overriding the parents get user method and using user resource. And I'm going to do one more thing. So this is private field, the user. So I think it won't hurt to anybody if I change this into protected, so that the child class can also read that field right here. And this now returns user resource instance. And let's go to the login form and let's change this user resource back into the user. And I think that is all, except that we need to go to the user controller right now, and instead of using app, where's the namespace, app models login form, we need to use app models models API models login form. Actually, in practice, I really don't change the namespaces. I prefer to delete the namespace, come here in the login form, hit Alt Enter, and import class whichever I want. Okay, so many people asked me about doing a separate video about tips and tricks on PHP Storm which can boost our productivity. So if you're interested in this type of video, just let me know in the comment section. Okay, so, and one more thing, also many people asked me to create Yii2 framework course on Udemy or somewhere, and I'm really interested in your opinion about this also. So if you want this course, just let me know in the comment section, and also let me know which projects or what type of course you want, which projects you prefer. Okay, I'm already started thinking about this. Okay, so we have done some extra work to make our code much better. Actually, I'm going to remove this. I won't need that. And let's make request, and the login works fine. Okay, now let's start working on sign up. Okay, so I'm going to create one more action sign up, and I'm going to create sign up model right now. Okay, so let me copy and paste login form and call it sign up form. We just need to change right here, and actually I need to take this content and slightly modify it, just like this. Okay, let me write this sign up form again. Okay, so we need username, we need password. I'm gonna declare one more field, password repeat. We don't want remember me. We don't want that user protected field. What else? Maybe we need that user. Let me leave it for now. So let me remove the comments. Username, password required. Also password repeat must be required. Remember me, we don't need. Validate password, we don't need it. We don't want that function, obviously. And instead of login, our function must be called register. Okay, so I'm going to remove that comments, otherwise they won't be correct. And right here, if the validation is passed, I'm going to call register. Okay, so let's create user instance. Actually, I'm going to open that console and copy the following code and put it right here. So the username will be this username. We don't have security helper, not the helper, but the component. Okay, so generate password. Here the password will be this password. Access token will be some random thing, and then if the user was successfully saved, then we need to return true from here. Okay, so otherwise we just need to return false, just like this. And if there will be false, there will be some errors in the user. Okay, so whenever we call that register from outside of the controller, if it returns false, we need to access that errors. Okay, the user errors. So for this, I'm going to change this and assign into this user, just like this. And I'm going to also change this user into, actually I made a mistake, so this must be user. Okay, and this user I'm going to change into public. What else do we need? So we don't want that get user anymore, so we are creating user. If it was not created, we return false. If it was created, we return true. If the validation was not passed, we return false immediately. And one thing which we need to do right here is the rule for password and password confirmation. Okay, so I'm going to search for Yii2 rules, and where does this come from? I'm going to search for compare rule. Okay, compare. We don't have it right here. Okay, I'm going to search for compare validator. Okay, and what do we have right here? So I need to find the correct usage. Okay, I didn't search it. Yii2 validation rules. Okay, core validators. Here we have Boolean, captcha, compare, and here we go. So password field compares, and here's the compare attribute password repeat. Actually, this is the exact line what we need. Okay, so I'm going to put this right here. Password compares to compare attribute password repeat. They must match each other, otherwise we will see an error. That password repeat is not used. That's okay. So let's go to user controller and now do something similar. Okay, so I'm going to copy this code, and here I need to use a sign up form. We need to load the post data inside the modal, and then we need to call register. Okay, and if the registration was successfully done, we need to return modals underscore user field. Okay, which will be set by this register. Okay, if it was successfully done. If it was not successfully done, however, if it returns something else, if it comes here or here, then we need to access the user and get some information. Okay, so here is one bug in our code. So if it doesn't pass the validation, it will return false from here, and right here, if we just try to return the errors of the user, user errors, this user will be false. Okay, if this if wasn't satisfied, this user won't be set and this will return false. What we can do right here is we can just set this into this user equals to user. This is one thing, and the second thing is that we can just return the modal errors. Okay, so if the validation wasn't passed, then we will have that modal errors. In best case, so we need to have the same rules declared in the sign up form as in the user model, so we can just simply return the modal errors just like this. Okay, and now let's try sign up. Okay, so let me duplicate this. We have here sign up. Inside the body we send, actually let's send just username and password. Okay, so we should see some validation errors. App model sign up, okay, that's my bad. So sign up form has a different namespace, app modules API models. Okay, and let's make request. App model sign up, okay, we are including it in the user controller with a different namespace, so let's import with correct namespace. Let's make request once again, and app models API models user. Now we have something else inside the sign up form. We are using this user, and this user is not imported right here. Okay, so let's import that user. Actually, I'm going to create an instance of user resource. Okay, and yeah, that's okay. Let's make request one more time, and we get our validation errors. Password repeat cannot be blank, and password must be equal to password repeat. Okay, let's send this field also. Password repeat equals, let's first give different password, and we get password must equal to password repeat, and then we give the same password. Okay, Zura 1234, and so here's the thing. So let's send this. So it actually created user and returned that, which means that now we have in the database two users with the same username, Zura. So we need to fix that also. Okay, right here we need to set username to be unique among the users. Okay, so actually I'm going to copy code for this. Okay, so here it is. So we say username, we're using unique role, then we give the target class. Okay, so inside that target class the username must be unique. Let's go to the PHP myadmin and just delete one user, and we have second one, and let's try to make request once again, and we get here error username. This username has already been taken, which is cool. Now let's make request using Sura2, send it, and we have here that working. Okay, cool. Now let's move on and see how we can like create nodes, update nodes, or get nodes. Okay, so I'm going to create now node controller in the controllers. I'm going to extend from not the REST controller in this case, but I'm going to extend from active controller. Okay, this active controller is a special controller. It's a REST controller also, but it's special controller that it works with active record objects. But we need to specify here model class, public property model class. Okay, so we don't have model class for nodes table, so we just need to generate that first. So I'm going to open GII model generator. The table name will be nodes, model class will be just nodes. Okay, the namespace will be app models. Let's use table prefix, let's use internalization, and let's preview. Okay, so here we have just actually I want to generate also active query object. Okay, app models query. This is also good practice for your, if you're building like big project, it's always good to generate active query classes that will like give you more organized code when you write where's order by and when you work with the database actually. Okay, active query class will be just node query, okay, inside that namespace. Let's preview this. We have now 2 classes to be generated, and let's click generate. Let's go to the models, and here we have that node model, which extends from the active record table name is nodes, and here we have node query. Okay, awesome. Now we need to actually start working with that controller. Okay, so model class equals to node, okay, node class. But here is again one, let me just write this, node class. Actually, as I mentioned before, whenever I work with API, I generally create resources. Okay, so I'm going to create a node resource also. That's a good practice. Node resource, which must extend that node model. Extends node, and basically let's leave it as it is for now, and then we can change this. Okay, so node resource, we have it right there, we have controller, and yeah, we can let's try. If I don't miss anything, let's just try to make request. Okay, so let me duplicate this once again. Here we have API node / index, and let's make get request, and it returns empty array. Okay, so let's duplicate this once again and create post request node / create. Okay, the body won't be like this. Okay, so we need to send title and password and body, but actually let's just leave the body empty. Okay, so send it, and it returned empty node with ID 1. So node was created, and then if we get node right here, it returns one node. It has title, body, created it, updated, and it created by. So created by obviously is null because we don't pass the authorization header information, but the created it and updated it should not be null. Okay, so I'm going to go to the that node model, and right there behaviors, and I'm going to actually add timestamp behavior, and I'm also going to add blameable behavior. Okay, so blameable behavior, and I'm going to modify this slightly. So I don't want both fields from blameable behavior. Instead, I just need created by. Okay, so I'm going to set updated by attribute to be false. Okay, so this blameable behavior works with 2 fields, created by, updated by, so I'm going to set updated by into false. I don't have it. Okay, now let's make request of creation once again. It's created and returned that object, created at, updated at, created by. It doesn't return title and body. And what's the reason? Probably because they were just null. Okay, I think that's already good. Now let's implement the authentication. Okay, so the active controller, which is the parent class of the node controller, has a couple of ready actions, okay, like index action, view action, create, update, delete, and options. And these are already existing, so whenever we type here /create, /update, /delete, that works fine. And its parent class, which is REST controller, already has some behaviors, okay, like content negotiator, verbs, authenticator, and rate limiter. The content negotiator behavior basically works like this. I just was not going to explain this, but if I touched, I'm going to show it to you. So API node index. Okay, so whenever we make the request from the browser, we get an XML, but when we make request from the postman, we get JSON. Okay, this is done by that content negotiator behavior. Depending on different content types sent from the client, this returns different format. The verbs filter just filters that we are making correct requests with correct verbs. For example, if I try to make post request on index action, this won't work, and we get method not allowed. Okay. Then we have authenticator, and that's the thing. So this composite auth basically is a special behavior which supports multiple authentication types. Okay, so this has auth methods array, and we can write here any auth method class that implements the auth interface. Okay, there are like I think 4 built-in authentication behaviors, but what we need to do is just bearer authentication behavior. Okay, so I'm going to add auth methods right here in the node controller, not right here, but in the node controller, and add their auth methods. So let's go to the node controller and right there override behaviors, and I'm going to actually take that behaviors and for authenticator for auth methods I'm gonna set it to equals to an array where we have bearer HTTP bearer auth, and this is the only one what we need, and let's just return the behaviors. Cool. Now let's try to make requests to get nodes, and we get unauthorized with status code 401. Okay, so let's just first call login. So I call login, I get the access token like this. Then when I want to make a request to get the nodes, I will go to the authorization. Actually, I can do like using headers, just like this. Okay, the header authorization equals bearer space and the token. Okay, and let's make request, and it returns nodes. But the Postman has a handy feature for this. Okay, so if we go to the authorization, choose bearer token, and paste my token right here, click send, and it does the same thing. Okay, and we cannot actually do anything regarding the node resource. We cannot create, we cannot update, we cannot do anything. Okay, so one more thing, what I want to show you is that if we configure our controller inside the URL manager, we can make requests on the same endpoint API node with just different verbs. Okay, so if I just make request on API node, it works right now because it uses the default action. But if I make a post request on API node, it won't work. It shows that method not allowed because it assumes that we want to get the index action. Okay, we want to post on index action. And if we go to the URL manager right now, fab URL manager, inside the rules, we need to pass one rule which will have a namespace of rest rule. Okay, so URL rule from namespace rest. Okay, then we need to pass here controller to be API / node. Okay, that's the controller, and let's make now post request on that endpoint immediately. Okay, and this still returns method not allowed. Okay, did I miss something? Okay, so let's make request once again. API node, method not allowed. Okay, let's make a request on get endpoint. Okay, let's see. So this URL rule, which is rest rule, has a couple of properties. Controller only accept patterns, pluralize true. I think that's the reason. The pluralize true by default automatically pluralizes the URL names for controllers. Okay, so if I just access it with API nodes, it will get all the nodes. If I make post request on API nodes, it now shows unauthorized. But let's pass here the bearer token. Okay, so here it is. So it created. Okay, by default it pluralizes the URL. So we can make now also delete request on API nodes /1, for example, and it returns with status code 204, which means that it did the job. Okay, so we can actually override this field from our rules and set pluralize set to false. Okay, and this URL simply let's do for 2. This simply won't work. Okay, it shows not found because API nodes doesn't exist anymore. It exists API node. Okay, so we can leave this as a pluralized false. That's also fine. Okay, so I think that's all about REST API. Now let's connect our REST API authorization and registration to the Vue.js application, which will be the most interesting part.